All right, it's 3 o'clock, so let me welcome everybody and bring them in. Hey there, Dan Harris here. Welcome to TPH Live, our daily on the weekdays meditation break for you, sanity break in the middle of a very difficult world at this point. Not only economic crisis, not only a pandemic. I guess it started pandemic, economic crisis, and now we've got so much pain and fear and anger coursing through America with the aftermath of the death of George Floyd. So much going on. And so hopefully we can be a place where you can take a break. Our teacher du jour is Rae Houseman. She is, let me just read her bio a little bit here. She's a dedicated practitioner who currently serves as the guiding teacher of Vermont Insight Meditation Center. She's the head of coaching for the 10% Happier app. If you listen to the 10% Happier podcast, you've heard her before because she sometimes comes on and answers questions from you all in the voicemails. She's a graduate of the Spirit Rock Community Dharma Leadership Program. She holds a master's degree in Somatic Psychology. And I got a cat climbing up on me now. Rae, hi, from me and Toby in New York City.
Oh, so good to see Toby again. Yeah, it's nice to see you. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, well, Toby, a little moment of lightness in a pretty heavy time. I know you wanted to talk today about sort of taking a look at our own conditioning. What do you mean by that?
Well, one of the things that I think the primary thing that the practice offers us the opportunity to do is to witness the tendencies of our own mind. And this is really where the crux of the learning happens in the practice, as we're just watching the habituated tendencies that arise due to conditioning from our circumstances, our environment, and then get reinforced by our own perceptions and beliefs. So is that helpful and clear about what I mean by conditioning? So sets behaviors from people around us, belief systems in our external world that we adapt to and condition our minds in reference to.
And this can be really useful if you want to think about how to play a constructive role in the current moment.
Yes, very, very useful. So one of the things that I think is just essential for myself as a white person, and what I encourage white people to do strongly, and in fact, it feels like a choiceless choice to make, particularly in these times, is to witness and observe the white supremacist or anti-Black conditioning that we have been immersed in and adapted to as a result of our cultural perspective and framing. So, yeah.
I mean, this is not an easy thing to do.
No, I mean, particularly in our culture, because the tendency is to adapt, particularly if you are spiritually aware and understand some of the inequities that we're dealing with in our racial systems and racial structures, racialized structures. The tendency is to want to do things like say that we don't see color, or we don't differentiate based on color, right, or race. But that's just not a reality that we have been raised within. So we need to be willing to turn inward and observe these tendencies or this conditioning in ourselves. It's painful, for sure. But the benefit of that is that then we're not driven by it unconsciously. And we have the potential to then liberate our own hearts and minds from this conditioning. And I really want to emphasize that we're doing this work for ourselves and for our brothers and sisters in the world. This is like we are burdened by the conditioning of white supremacy and anti-Blackness. we as white people, as a white race, upholding this, even if it's just by complacency or ignorance, it's harming us because we're living within a very narrow frame of understanding of our own selves and our own heart's capacity. If we're not turning toward this conditioning and willing to see how it's framing our lives, trending us toward perfectionism and production, and overly concerned about appearance, whitewashing our culture, our historical ethnic cultures as white people that we originated from. And then having us centralize our own individual experience in a way in which we aren't able to see other cultures as having value. And then we don't get to experience the richness and the depth of those cultures.
You said a lot. I think it's a lot for people to take in. Maybe that, and it's so much, so it's really important, and said well. I think maybe now's a good time for me to press pause and let you take over and run a meditation. I know we generally keep these to 5 minutes, but let me say that if you want to go longer, that's fine too. You're the boss, but use your own judgment here.
Okay, great. Thank you. What I'd like to do is use the body as a primary support as we move into this practice session. One of the most important things that the practice offers us in relation to this work is the capacity to move into it, not from an intellectual perspective, but from an embodied, integrated way of being. So turning the attention toward the sensations of the body. Allowing them to be known. It can be helpful to feel into the contact points where the body meets the chair or cushion, or whatever support it's resting on, feeling into the weight and pressure there. Directing the attention toward the body can support the mind in coming more into connection with the present moment experience. And with that as a foundation, I'll now invite you to bring some curiosity and interest to the emotional tone or emotional quality of the experience in the moment. And just being open to whatever it is you notice. It can be helpful to tune into the resonant sensations in the body as you feel into the emotional tone. How do you experience this emotional quality in the body in this moment? Some sensation-based words that may resonate with your experience and may be helpful to use when feeling into the sensations are tightness, tingling, buzzing, opening, stretching, numbness, lightness, heaviness. Just noticing what's so for you in the moment. There's a great range of sensations you may notice arising. If at any point it's overwhelming or disorienting to connect with the felt sense related to the emotion, it can be helpful to open up the field of attention to include an awareness of the ambient sounds in the environment. So just widening the field of attention, noticing sound. No need to chase after the sounds. Just simply allow them to be known as they are arising naturally. And if needed, you can even open your eyes. This isn't a common instruction in practice, but it's a great direction to explore if there's a sense of disorientation or overwhelm with relation to emotions as they arise. So you can open your eyes and allow for a visual orientation to your environment to be known, if that feels supportive. Practicing in this way uses the capacity of the mind to intentionally direct the attention in a particular way to support the mind in coming into a greater sense of balance. So in this case, we are directing the attention toward aspects of the external environment so that the mind isn't hyper-focused on the internal experience. It can be helpful to remember that you can always bring the attention back to the sensations of the body and feel into the contact points where the body is meeting the chair or cushion. And rest the attention there if that feels supportive. So just being skillful about how you direct the attention in a way that allows a sense of balance to come to the mind. And finally, offering yourself a sense of appreciation for your willingness to be with your experience and hold space for it in this way. And when you feel ready, you can gently open the eyes. And thank you for your practice.
Thanks, Rae. Got a couple minutes here to take questions. Susan asks, what actions can we take? I feel helpless. If it was safe, I'd go to DC to protest. So how do I help? How do I help make changes?
Yeah, this is a great question. I think one of the most important things that we can do as white people, I can say, is to begin to get an understanding of cultural conditioning and what brings about states of fear, and begin to feel into how we react to states of fear within ourselves and what makes us feel unsafe in certain conditions. I'm not trying to suggest that we want to go into places where we're going to put ourselves in harm's way, but there's often an assessment of situations that, or people that are preconditioned or biased that bring up a sense of a lack of safety. And really the work is in feeling into that on your own so that you have a sense for what's happening in your own system, so that you're not just walking around in the world. I would say this is probably the most important point of what it is I'm speaking to. In the world, in your daily life, just reacting sort of unconsciously to these biases and conditioned ways of responding and reacting to people. So getting a deeper sense of understanding of your own racial conditioning, I think, is probably the most important thing that we can do and most important way we can engage, because then any action that we take will be driven by a greater sense of awareness in ourselves and grounded integration in our body. And there are some great resources that I can offer, Resmaa Menakem has a book that works on working with trauma, racialized trauma, and goes through a lot of activities that you can feel into and work through yourself. And the book is called My Grandmother's Hands. I highly encourage people to check that out. And then as white people, I highly encourage checking out the resource White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo, that book. It's a great text. Really, becoming informed is a key part of learning how to engage in a way that's actually supportive of the Black leadership and people that we want to be offering our support to.
That's a great answer. Sally asks, can you say something about the opportunity for right speech? What can guide us here?
Wow. So right speech, I think, in this situation is breaking white solidarity, honestly. And right speech, I think, is motivated by right action in recognition of the deaths of so many Black people at the hands of police, and also just the injustice of the embedded racism in our systems, and just naming that and recognizing it and bringing speech to that, I think, is right speech in this situation, or in regard to the topic at hand. So another thing I think is true with regard to right speech is to be able to have a sense for your own understanding level. And so that you're not trying to speak for a different people or trying to assess a different people, or speak on behalf of a different people. You want to understand that. And that's a real strong component of right speech in relation to this topic.
Thank you, Rae. And just some other resources off the top of my head. One of them is there's a great, it's just we seem to be directing our resources here toward white people, which I feel is appropriate, given that the indications I have, at least on the podcast, are on the 10% Happier podcast, is that the audience is overwhelmingly white. There is a podcast called Scene on Radio, SCENE on Radio. They've done 4 seasons. Each season has a different theme. The second season is called Seeing White. It's about whiteness. And I found it to be incredibly skillfully done and interesting. So that's just another resource I'd throw out there. And on the 10% Happier podcast, we're going to be doing a ton. We have an episode up this week with 7A Selassie. Tomorrow we're putting up one with Lama Rod Owens, who was taught here on TPH Live. And then on Monday, we're going to do something with the executive director of a group called White Awake. And it's about sort of having conversations using mindfulness among white people, which is very important at this time, because you don't always want to be forcing people of color to help you figure all this out. It's important for white people to grapple with whiteness among ourselves. So a lot coming up and a lot of resources out there. And I wish everybody the best of luck in trying to find ways to be useful at this time. Rae, you certainly have found a way to be useful. I'll just say as an N of 1, I found that meditation very helpful. So, and everything you said. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. And it's great to be a white person speaking to white people on the topic of race in this time. So thanks for giving me a platform to do that. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. And we will be back here tomorrow. In the meantime, everybody, stay healthy and stay safe.